The Cubs rallied from a 3-run deficit to beat the Rays 6-4 on Friday afternoon at Wrigley Field. We're going to break that down, and we're going to look ahead to the impact of Matthew Boyd's outing for a potential playoff rotation and much, much more. I'm Andy Martínez, and this is the Cubs Daily Podcast. The Cubs fell into an early hole when former Cub Christopher Morel crushed a 3-run home run in the top of the first. Morel received a nice ovation from the 38,794 fans that were at the friendly confines as he stepped up to the plate. He then swung almost helplessly at a curveball under the zone from Matthew Boyd before crushing a four-seam fastball that went halfway up the left field bleachers. It was kind of emblematic of Christopher Morel and who Cubs fans had gotten used to seeing, right? This is a guy who has a ton of pop when he hits it and can also swing and miss a lot. He's got a 36% strikeout rate this season, and Friday's home run was just his 11th of the season, kind of underscoring what kind of season he's having. And it sure seemed like things were teetering for Boyd after that home run. Part of the eerie sensation was the fact that the All-Star lefties really struggled in his last 6 starts entering Friday. In that time, he had a 5.05 ERA, and the Cubs were 1-5 in that stretch. It felt like that home run, coupled with a one-out single 2 batters later, meant that a big inning was coming for Tampa Bay, and the Cubs were going to be in a hole that they couldn't overcome before they even took a turn at the plate. But Boyd settled in and retired 8 straight after that one-out knock from Jake Mangum, and that gave the offense time to chip away and get back in the game. In the second inning, 3 of the first 4 hitters reached base, giving the Cubs a run. Then Michael Busch hit an RBI single, and Ian Happ added a run-scoring base hit that suddenly tied the game. The Cubs added a pair of runs the next inning with a Nico Horner walk, followed up by a Moises Ballesteros triple. He's got wheels, man. And Ballesteros scored on a Matt Shaw fielder's choice later in the frame. Ian Happ wrapped up the scoring with a solo home run in the 3rd inning. He's been on a tear lately, and he's kind of hitting into his groove at the right time for the Cubs offense. I mentioned Boyd had retired 8 straight, but he ran into some trouble in the 4th inning. He started the frame allowing a single and a walk. Then he used his not-so-secret weapon, his pickoff, to nab Everson Pereira at first base for the second out of the inning. That kind of allowed him to regain control of his inning and not let things teeter out of control. It was Boyd's 11th pickoff, the most by a Cubs pitcher in a season since at least 1901, and Clayton Kershaw's the last pitcher with that many in a season, having done so in 2012. After that, the Cubs' suddenly dominant bullpen shut the door. They retired 12 straight batters to end the game. Porter Hodge picked up the 6th, Drew Pomeranz took the 7th, Brad Keller handled the 8th, and Andrew Kittredge nailed down the save to seal the win. During the Cubs' 3-game winning streak, the last 2 in Atlanta and then Friday's opener against Tampa Bay, the bullpen has pitched 11 1/3 scoreless innings with 14 strikeouts and allowing just a hit and no walks. That's lights out. Here's what Counsell said about the game and the bullpen.
Yeah, 12 up, 12 down. I think that's much like Wednesday night in Atlanta. They did a heck of a job. I guess they had one more run to work with today, but they were perfect. They were absolutely perfect. So, absolutely great job.
The last few games, the offense has been kind of steady pressure. Just how much have you liked kind of it's been constant pressure?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. We frankly had some base running mistakes that can't happen late in the game that probably cost us some other runs. But absolutely, we had base runners, we had pressure. You make them make pitches. We got some huge 2-out hits today. So overall, it was a good offensive day.
I got to say, I think really it wasn't as much as momentum. I was off for the first 2 hitters, and kind of got my footing back against Morel, but it was I just missed with a little bit of a pitch there, and he got it up on a day that room for error. A fly ball is small, right? And I know where to go with him. I was trying to go in, and I missed out over. But it's unfortunate that, sometimes this is how baseball works, is that I wasn't as sharp for those first 2 hitters. And you can throw Morel in there, too, and then, before you know it, it's 3-0. But guys picked me up today on that sense, and that was it's just awesome feeling when offense does that after you never want to put your team in that position to start off the game, but man, they were awesome. They kept the pressure on all game long.
Matthew Boyd's outings down the stretch are important. He isn't the same pitcher that tossed 8 scoreless innings against the Yankees before the All-Star game, or the guy who threw 7 shutout against Kansas City in the next outing after the break, but he's still got a vital role on this team. If the playoffs started tomorrow and the Cubs opened a 3-game set against the Padres at Wrigley, or the Dodgers, who are just 2.5 games up on the Padres, Boyd is still your number 3 starter, your game 3 starter. I've discussed, and Lance Brozdowski has discussed on this podcast, whether Cade Horton or Shota Imanaga would be a game 1 starter. And assuming that those two get that first 2 games in some capacity, either Horton or Imanaga in game 1 and the other in game 2, the likely third guy is Boyd. And if you're listening, you're probably thinking, what? You just mentioned his struggles of late. After Friday's 5 innings of 4-run ball, his ERA is 5.31 in those 7 games, in his last 7 games. But you got to think of the situation as a whole. If you're in a game 3, it's win or go home, and the length isn't as important. Every man is available in that game, and while you'll gladly take 7 or 8 scoreless from Boyd in a do-or-die game, that's really not the expectation in that situation. You just want a guy who can pick up ideally 12 to 15 outs, and at that point you can turn to the bullpen at the first sign of trouble. If there's 2 guys on in the 4th inning like there was on Friday, you're probably going to your bullpen in a game 3 in a must-win situation. In the playoffs, that's kind of a luxury that you can do because you have 10 guys in the bullpen. So do you want the Boyd of June who could cover 21 to 24 outs and it felt like win day? Yeah, of course. In a game 3, you want that. Absolutely. Who wouldn't? But in that situation, he's potentially lining up for, you're kind of hoping for quality and not necessarily quantity. We're close enough that you can sort of map out the rotation plans the rest of the way. If the Cubs stay on the 5-man rotation that they have right now with Boyd, Tyone, Ray, Imanaga, and Horton, Boyd would line up for the final game of the season, but he would likely be skipped in that situation because that would mean that he'd be available for game 3 only on 3 days rest. Shota Imanaga, as it stands, is lined up for game 1 and Cade Horton for game 2 on this 5-man plan, but both of those guys would be pitching on 4 days rest in all of those outings. But the Cubs also might not have too much to play for in those final 6-ish games of the season. They hold a 4-game lead on the Padres for the top wild card spot in the NL, like I mentioned, and they could have locked up that position by then. If that's the case, the Cubs probably manipulate the rotation to build in extra rest for Imanaga, Horton, and Tyone, kind of like they've done all season. They've tried to get them on 5 or 6 days rest when they can. Tyone pitched on like 10 days rest, I think it was. I think that was the exact number between his last start before the All-Star game and his first start after the All-Star game, where he tossed 8 scoreless in New York and then 7 scoreless against Kansas City. Maybe the Cubs could use some of the suddenly numerous multi-inning relievers. Aaron Savali and Ben Brown are in the Cubs bullpen, and Craig Counsell said before the game that Michael Soroka, who tossed 2 1/3 innings in Iowa on Thursday night, that his next outing would be in the big leagues. Maybe you could use one of those guys or a combination of all those guys to throw bullpen games to build in rest via bullpen games. Or maybe you could slot back Javier Assad into the rotation for a start or 2 to build in more time, more rest for Imanaga, Horton, and Boyd. Either way, the Cubs have a focus on the present. Like, they're clearly trying to win this series against the Rays, and they're trying to win Saturday's matinee. But there's also a slight eye on October. That's kind of what happens when you have a 99.9% playoff odds, according to Fangraphs Baseball Reference. There's clearly going into the playoffs barring a catastrophic collapse. So now you have to plan on how you win those games in October and make a deep run in the playoffs. Here's Matthew Boyd on how he's preparing to make sure he's ready for that and how he's imparting some of the experiences that he went through last season with Cleveland and a playoff run on teammates like Horton and other guys.
What's your sort of like checklist here for this final segment of the season so
Yeah.
that you're at your best at the most
Yeah.
important time of the year?
I think most importantly, it's understanding, you really got to put the results aside, no different than you did in April, May, and June, and go out there and you say, okay, like, how do I define success? And you go out there and you attack it. And you don't get swayed by the stat line one way or the other. And you just stick to the process of what you expect of yourself. And that's not the most attractive answer or anything like that, but it's kind of what's necessary going in forward, right? And you attack that, each day, each start, and as monotonous as that sounds, when it's done, you assess it and go forward to the next one.
How much of that are you sharing with guys like Cade Horton and some other guys who don't have that big league experience level and like the playoff experience as you guys are trying to work towards that?
I mean, definitely. Cade's an awesome learner, and I'll say this: I'm also learning from Cade every time he takes the ball out there. But to that point, it's like the game doesn't change. Whether it's right now, I really don't like talking about October at the end of September. When we're on September 12th right now, but The game doesn't change then, just like it doesn't change when you're playing in Mesa, Arizona, in February, or Tokyo in March. It's the same game. What you expect of yourself doesn't change, and you go out there and you do it. And the more you can pay attention and just understand where you're going on which side of that spectrum, and always bringing it back is, that's the game within the game, and that's what you want to hold yourself to.
As I mentioned, the Cubs hold a 4-game lead on the Padres for that top spot in the NL wildcard at the time of recording, which is so vital because it hosts that 3-game series. It would mean they're at Wrigley, and you can check out MarqueeSportsNetwork.com. Tony Andracki wrote a playoff breakdown of where things stand as of Thursday, so yesterday. The Cubs would be hosting, and they are so much better at home, and the Padres really, really struggle on the road. So you really want to have that 3-game set at Wrigley Field and have that home field advantage. Their magic number to clinch that spot is 12 games, and it's also worth noting that the Padres are only 2.5 games back of the Dodgers in the NL West. So that second wild card spot could be Los Angeles if things change over the final 2+ weeks of the season. Crazier things have happened. The magic number for the Cubs to clinch a playoff spot is now 7 games. The Padres, Reds, and Giants, all teams that could impact those numbers, play Friday night on the West Coast. So those numbers might be reduced by the time you're listening to me. At the time of recording, those games haven't even started. We're a little bit way off from those games beginning. They're 5 games back of the Milwaukee Brewers for the NL Central, which is very unlikely to be overcome if we're being honest. Like, that's probably not going to happen, but it's not impossible either. So just for the sake of what if, the Brewers' magic number to clinch the NL Central is 13, and they open a 3-game series against the St. Louis Cardinals on Friday before hosting the Angels for 3. They travel to San Diego for a 3-game set and then come home to end the season against the Reds. That's a pretty tough last 6-game stretch. So sure, if you can reduce the number, maybe you could see a path where over those final 6 games, the Reds maybe are playing for their playoff life and San Diego's playing for seeding, or maybe the NL West could get difficult for Milwaukee. Yeah, of course, it's possible, but probably unlikely. But I just wanted to paint that picture because you never know. Crazy things have happened in baseball. It's a wild game. Either way, Saturday should be a fun day. Colin Ray gets to start opposite Drew Rasmussen, but the game almost takes a backseat to the pregame festivities. Anthony Rizzo is going to retire as a Cub before the game, and he'll return to Wrigley Field. He posted on social media. It was really, really cool. If you haven't checked it out, go to his Instagram, his Twitter, wherever. He posted it on both, that he's going to be wearing a signed jersey that was signed by patients who they had visited, him and his wife, Emily, had visited at Lurie's Children's Hospital. Those children were battling cancer, and it was signed by all of them. It's a really, really touching gesture and kind of sums up who he is as a person. He's a guy who won the Roberto Clemente Award. Like, he does so much for the community, and he's showing that in really his retirement and one of his last grand acts as a player, doing so with the Cubs and the children he's impacted so much. He'll be honored before the game, and he'll be on the field. He'll speak to media as well. It's going to be a fun day just celebrating this icon of the 2016 team and really one of the faces of the franchise over the last decade plus. We'll have coverage of it all on Marquee Sports Network and the Marquee Sports Network app. So make sure to check it out there. We'll also have a ton of content on MarqueeSportsNetwork.com. Tony and Jackie and I are going to be here. We're going to be covering it all. We'll have you with plenty of coverage on the website, so check it out there. But that'll do it for this episode of the Cubs Daily Podcast. I'm Andy Martinez, and thanks for tuning in and subscribing, as always.